Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Sruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. I'm very happy to return to all of you after this long interval, and I wish you all a very happy new year. So today we are going to discuss a very, very profound and one of the most celebrated hymns of the Rigveda Samhita. It has got many implications. It's called Nasadaya Suktam. So it has got this name because it begins like Na asadasid, no sadasid. Na sadasi, no sadasi. That's how it begins. We will find out the meaning and the implication and interpretation of these verses in course of time. But at the beginning, a few words of introduction to give you an idea of the profound significance, philosophical and spiritual significance of this well-known verse. You should remember it attracted the attention of many European Indologists right from the beginnings of 19th century. It appears in the 10th mandala of Rigveda Samhita. As you may remember, the entire Rigveda Samhita is divided into 10 sections called mandalas. Each of these sections, mandalas, contain a number of suktams called hymns. And each of these hymns will have a number of verses called slokas. So this particular suktam appears in the 10th mandala, 129th suktam, 7 verses, only 7 verses. Now, it deals with this question of the creation of existence, not of this world, but of existence. The existence is a much broader term than world. And now, we all know that Hinduism accepts what might be called the cyclic theory of existence. Call it creation. In fact, as you are going to find out, it is not creation, but projection. Because creation implies creating something from a state where that created substance did not exist. For example, you make a pot from clay. The clay did not exist in the form of pot, and a new entity comes into existence. It is called creation of the pot. Now, in reality, the pot is only a projection of clay at a different level, in a different format. When it assumes a new form and new utility value and a new name, you call it pot. So something like that, what we mean by the so-called creation. The so-called creation, please remember, it is only projection or manifestation of something which already existed in an unmanifested state. So that's the importance of this cyclic theory of existence. Not only of different entities in the phenomenal world, like oceans, mountains, and valleys, but also living beings. They go through this eternal cycles of what we call in Sanskrit Srishti, Sthiti, and Pralaya. It's called Laya, Prakashena, Laya, Pralaya. So what are these 3 states? The state before this so-called creation or Srishti or projection happens. So the evolution or the manifestation of projection is called Srishti, and its existence in that particular form format is called sthiti or sustenance, and is going back to its causal form is called pralaya or involution or dissolution. Now, this sutta will tell you something very interesting. This world is not a new creation, but at the same time, the state before creation is not a state of absolute non-existence, or it is not a state of the existence of the absolute reality. So that's the implication. We will come to that slowly. In short, what it means is creation is only a process. It is not an event. It's only a process. It is only a projection. It is a developing process. It's not coming into existence from a state of non-existence. It is not making of something, but a struggle, a gradual movement to get back to equilibrium. In other words, creation is nothing but a manifestation from a state of unmanifest or the non-manifestation, but it will again go back to the state of non-manifestation. So, well, I'm myself not a physicist. So basically, I'm what I may like to call a lifelong student of scriptures and philosophy. But my own limited knowledge of physics, perhaps some of you may be professional physicists, can add more, can throw more light on this subject. If you believe this existence, the cosmos came into existence before the Big Bang, then the state before the Big Bang, that is being implied in the first part of this verse, this suktam. At the beginning, there was neither existence nor non-existence. It was neither absolute reality nor absolute unreality. So what is this projection? So you find a lot of ideas coming here, but it is not a hymn of theogony. Theogony is a genealogy or study of the evolution or development of different deities, gods and goddesses. A particular branch is called theogony. So the ultimate answer to the question, what is the nature of existence or the so-called creation, is not a negation. It is not an affirmation. It is not an idea or a creator God, a thing or a concept like creationism, but it is a prolonged contemplation into the mystery of what is beyond description. So I shall begin the first part of this suktam, because I have in front of me the Rigveda Samhita with Sayanacharya's commentary. Sayanacharya's commentary is taken up because he was the one who wrote commentaries on all the four Vedas. So as a prelude to this verse, we have to remember, every hymn has got a rishi, and there will be a reference to the particular meter in which it is composed, and also to the particular deity to which to whom it is addressed. So Parameshti is Prajapati. Parameshti Prajapati is Rishi. I mean the name of the great sage to whom this truth, this mystery was revealed, is Prajapati, and the particular meter in which this suktam is composed is Trushtuk. So you find in the previous class on Purusha Suktam, we find Purusha Suktam contains Trushtuk and Ushtuk, both the meters, but these mostly Trushtuk Chanda and Paramatma Devada. So it begins like this. Nasadasi, no sadasi tadanim, nasid raju, no vyoma paroyat, kimavariva kuha kasya sharman nambhakimasid gahanam gibhiram. So I'm not reading the entire Sayana's Bhashya. It's a longer one, but I have selected certain sections of Sayana's commentary. So what Sayanacharya is going to tell you? So I just read some of these words, then continue the description of the Suktam in general. So Srishtehi Pragavastha Nirasta Samasta Prapancha Ya Pralayavastha Sa Nirupyati. So what is the subject of discussion here? Before the so-called creation began, there was a state, and the state is called Pralayavastha. So, laya means merging into. Pralaya is merging into something in a more comprehensive manner, because the word, the particular prefix called upasarga, pra, implies the comprehensive nature of the act or the verb that is put after the prefix of upasarga. So pragashenalaya means what is existed, what is existed for some time, going back to its causal form is pralaya. So this creation, again, I'm using the word creation because if I use the projection all the time, sometimes it can lead to into misunderstanding. But you remember, creation here is totally different in its concept and in its philosophical significance from what creation implies in the biblical literature or in Abrahamic literature in general, where a creator God creates this world. So from a state of non-existence, a creator God, and an anthropomorphic, monotheistic God concept creates this world. Now here, it is something different. So we have to keep that difference in mind when we use the word creation, because that's a common word that is popular and more widely understood to English reading public. So I'm using the word, but you have to remember the creation in this particular context of Nasadiya Suktam doesn't imply a creator God creating this world from a state where this world did not exist. In short, I shall give the format. Our karmas, our vasanas, our tendencies, our impressions, our samskaras, all that we have accumulated in our life, they will remain in seed form when this universe one day goes back to its causal form. And after a period, this universe will re-emerge. That is the next sarga, next projection, next creation. And based on our actions, our thoughts, our impressions, we will re-emerge. And again, this cycle continues. So the cycles of creation, existence, dissolution, and re-emerging of this universe. This continues. This is the essence of the cyclic theory of creation in Hindu philosophy. So here, Srishtehi Prank. Before Srishti, A means creation. Again, creation implies projection. We should remember that. Now, what's the difference between a projection and a creation? A projection is a manifestation of something which already in a way exists in an unmanifest form, which suddenly appears to exist. And that state is called projection. So before the world came to be projected or created, Pragavastha nirasta samasta prapancha ya pralayavastha sa nirupiti. What was the state before that creation. Maybe some of you who are physicists would like to use the term during the pre-Big Bang time. Think of that. During the pre-Big Bang period, what was that? What existed? So the hymn begins, Prayadeshayam avasthidam yadasya jaguto murilakshanam tat asat na asid sasavishanavat niruvakyam na asid nahi tadrishat karanav asit sado jagada utpatti sambhavati. So what it means is, before this creation, during the pre-Big Bang time period, absolute non-existence. It was not absolute non-existence. And so the idea that the world was created out of something that is empty, the world came out of emptiness, that idea is rejected logically here. The other commentators will tell you that from nothingness, nothing can come into existence. That idea behind. So it was not something that was absolutely unreal. So that absolute unreality is called asat. Now this sat, asat, these two words, they have got a great significance in Vedanta. Remember, this is one of the most wonderful documents of Advaita philosophy. Maybe one of the earliest proclamation of Advaita philosophy. Without much implication in ethics or morality, but more of a highly intellectual inquiry into the nature of existence. Now, Sat in Vedanta means something that exists all the time. Now, what do you mean by something that exists all the time? Something that remains the same without a change. That's the meaning of Sat. So the Vedantic philosophers will say Shadvikara Atida, Trikala Abadhida, and then Avastha Traya Abadhida, and again Sarvapramana Avadhi. So some of these 3-4 very important technical terms, these are just like passwords in Vedanta. I should refer to these important statements because they capture a whole lot of meaning within one single structure. It's like categorical imperative, Kant's concept of categorical imperative. If you write a paragraph to substitute this Kantian technical word, you may go crazy and the listeners also will go crazy. If you use the particular word, everything becomes clear. I'm reminded of a funny joke. Somebody tried to coin a Sanskrit word for electric switch. And to give an example of neglecting or being indifferent to some of the technical words used in all branches of learning, in philosophy, in information technology, or in any area of learning or human activity. So the Sanskrit Pandit who invented, who had the audacity to invent a Sanskrit substitute for electricity, for electric switch, was Vidyut Shakti Gamana Agamana Niyantrana Kendra Yantram. Now, there is no better way to drive anyone crazy. Vidyut Shakti means electricity. Gamana means going. Agamana means coming. Niyantrana means the regulating point. Kendra means machine. Now, you can imagine this Sanskrit is almost runs into full sentence. It can never be a proper substitute for switch, electric switch. Like that, in Vedanta also, there are certain very important technical terms. They are loaded with certain implications, and centuries of great philosophers, dialecticians, professors, and teachers of Vedanta, they have enriched the meaning and implication of these technical words. So what are the technical words? For example, the ultimate reality is that which can never be explained or described or defined by any of the tools of epistemology, any of the tools of theory of knowledge, direct perception, inference, comparison, that is analogy or verbal testimony or presumption or negation. None of these tools can ever describe that absolute reality. Because the moment you describe, you limit it, it becomes finite. It's no more absolute. The moment you describe something, you are limiting it, you are bringing it in something the level of the relative. So the absolute can never be defined. Again, it remains the same without any change in the past, in the present, and future. It's called Trigalapadhyaya, not being affected by any kind of change, the past, present, and future. Shadvikara Atida. It is beyond any of the changes, any of these modifications, like coming into a state of empirical existence, existing, growing, evolving, decaying, and dying and disappearing. And also it should be experienced without any change, the same in the triple states of human consciousness, like the waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. So the point is, what existed before creation cannot be called the absolute. Because if it can be absolute, it is Sat. So what is the opposite of Sat? Asat means something that is absolutely non-existent. Absolutely non-existent. Asat is absolutely non-existent. Sat is something that exists all the time. So absolute existence is implied by the word Sat. Brahman, Paramarthika Satta, the absolute reality. Absolute non-existent is implied by the word Asat. So the Nasadiya Suttam begins, Na Asadasid. In the beginning, what existed was not absolute non-existence. In the beginning, what existed was not absolute non-existence. So to give examples of what you mean by absolute non-existence, for example, the typical examples are like, for example, the horns of a hare, equal to Sasavishana. In fact, Sayanacharya uses, Sasavishanavat Nirubhakyam na asid. It was not something like the horns of a hare. No, because it was not absolute non-existence that existed before the Big Bang. Nahi tadrishan karanam asya sado jagada utpatti sambhavati. The reason is, from absolute non-existence, this world cannot come into existence. Swami Vivekananda, in some of his lectures, he drives home this idea again and again. So most probably Swamiji studied this suktam, and it is a modern interpretation of the suktam. But Swamiji refers to the suktam. I think he wrote a translation of this in Bengali, which is translated in English, but it's not exactly the translation of Sayana's commentary. But what he says is the fundamental principle, and this applied in Sankhya philosophy also, from absolute existence, from absolute emptiness, this world cannot come into existence. Asat means absolute emptiness. This world cannot come into existence. And of course, there is another examples for absolute non-existence or asat. Like, for example, the sky. Sometimes you may look at the sky, you may think there's a flower. So Akasha Kusuma, there's a lotus flower in the sky, which is totally inconceivable. The moment you utter it, the fact that it cannot exist becomes obvious. That is the significance of asat. So the first part of the suktam is na asadasid. And then the next one is tata no sad asid. Similarly, the absolute reality also did not exist. So the sage to whom it was revealed is slowly moving towards the ultimate conclusion that the real cause of this universe was revealed to the sage when his mind became pure. Sadobandhum asadi niravindan hadipadisha kavayo manisha. So the real answer to the mystery of the world comes only when we meditate, when our mind evolves, and then the true mystery of this reality is revealed, and it is revealed only as an intuition, not as a verbal proclamation. So that is the idea behind. And some of the commentators, later minor commentators mentioned, they say, you get a full picture of anything only when you chase an idea with a pure mind, which is called mananam in Sanskrit. You listen to something, you read something, or you may see a painting or listen to a great music. You understand the true profoundness or greatness, the glory of what you are seeing or what you listen to. Only when your mind closes, when the mind goes after that idea, when you close your eyes, turn your attention towards yourself, and you contemplate on the painting you saw, or the song that you listen to, or the music that you listen to, then only you get the full implication of even our visual empirical experiences. So ultimately, this truth was revealed to the sage in his meditation when his mind evolved, when he reached an exalted stage of contemplation. So the next part is Tatha no sadasit. Naiva sadatmavat satvena nirvajyam nanu no sadidi paramarthika satyasya nishedha. So the next word, no sadasit, means, it implies that the absolute reality also did not. It was not the absolute reality that existed before the world began. So remember, it's not that absolute reality did not exist. What it says, what existed before this creation cannot be called the absolute reality. It cannot be called the absolute unreality. Remember, the absolute reality always exists. But the sage in his contemplation feels that what existed before cannot be called the absolute, but cannot be called the non-absolute. That means absolute emptiness, because from absolute emptiness, the world cannot come into existence. But if you are absolute reality, then it cannot create this world. Because if it is absolutely real, it cannot undergo any change. Then from that, this world cannot come into existence. What it means is the absolute reality projects itself or appears to have become this universe. In other words, this world is only a projection. Why is it only a projection? Not a creation. Again, you have to remember, if you use the word creation in the true sense of the term, the pot is different from a lot of clay that is lying there. These are two empirical realities. Empirical reality is not absolutely different. But apparently there is a difference. So the clay manifests, projects as pot. But here the point is, when it comes to Nasadi Suktam, the implication is the absolute reality in its association with the with Maya. The word Maya is also very clearly implied in Nasadi Suktam. The word darkness is used here in the coming mantras. The darkness refers to Maya. So what is Maya? Maya is something that's not actually real, but its unreality becomes clear only when you are away from it, when you are free from it. So this Maya or Mithya are two important words, which are actually Nasriya Suktam is perhaps the first important document that in a way reflects the future dialectical dimensions of Advaita Vedanta. Because the world is not absolute and reality. It says the world is not absolute reality either. What is this world? This world is there, but the fact that it is only a relative entity is a spiritual experience that you feel when you reach an exalted state of your spiritual evolution. So to give, maybe it's important in this context because the word Brahman, Maya, Mithya, these terms are implied in this verse, but I shall refer to that on a later occasion. So in this suktam, you find Brahman is implied and Maya is implied. Maya is the creative power, and the word Maya is implied in this particular word as darkness. Kim avariva kuha kasya sharman ampakimasid gekenam gebhiram. So in this universe, everything appeared to be merged in a kind of Maya, a kind of darkness. So in that state, na murtirasid na murdanna tarhi na ratriya anna asid prakeda anidavadam sudhayata dekam tasmad anyatna parakinchanasa. It continues saying, there was no death, there was no immortality, there was no night, there was no day, there was no time, no months, no weeks. All these did not exist. All these come into existence when the absolute reality associates with Maya, and then this world comes into existence, the name and forms, and this time, space, causation, structure come into existence. What is absolute reality? The absolute reality is only something that we experience within us, not a concept that we believe in, but an inner experience that we feel within when we are out of this time-space equation. When time-space equation is transcended, there is no night, there is no day, there is no sun, there is no moon, there is no day, there is no night, there is no week, no month. It goes on like that. Time stands still, which means time is transcended. When time stands still, it means time is transcended. So very, very beautiful, very profound, very mystical poem. So before that, perhaps it is important for us to understand how this Advaitic idea of how the absolute reality appears to create this world. Okay, now I shall try to refer to some of the definitions of Maya or Mithya. So one definition, because there are many definitions. One is indescribability. Sadasatta anadhigaranatum va mithyatum is an important definition given by the author of Panchapadika, Padmapada, in his Panchapadika, which is a important commentary in the Vivarana tradition of Advaita, which is a commentary on Shankaracharya's Prasthanatraya Bhashya, that is Brahma Sutram Bhashya. So there cannot be anything which is neither real nor unreal. Then what are you talking about? You're talking about something that appears to exist, but really doesn't exist. So that's the important thing. It's a bit tricky. The absolute reality appears to have become this world. So when you talk about this world is defined as mithya. So what do you mean by mithya? Mithya is something that is not absolutely real, because when you become spiritually enlightened, you transcend it. But it is not absolutely unreal, because before you get spiritual enlightenment, you are very much within it, within time, space, and causation. It's called the structure of mithya. And again, in some of the other books, it is also mentioned Sat Viviktatvam va Mithyatvam, Jnana Nivartitvam va Mithyatvam. That is, Jnana Nivartitvam va Mithyatvam is a very important definition given by Prakasharmedi in the Panchapadika Vivarana. But he says, when you get this absolute spiritual experience, not knowledge in the intellectual sense, but when you get this absolute spiritual experience, this inner experience, then you come to know of the relative nature, the changeability, the changing, the impermanent nature of all this phenomenal existence. It is not something that you believe in. It is something that you feel deeply within yourself as part of your own spiritual evolution. So that's why in this important poem, the author uses the language of paradox, the language of opposites. It's the only way to express what is beyond description. So the world itself is essentially indescribable. It's a mystery. So instead of proclaiming it as a mystery, in one word, the poet goes on explaining, well, you look for yourself, what's the nature of the world, how it is there. But before it became like this, there was something which was not absolutely real, which was not absolutely unreal either. So as we proceed further, you can go deeper into the great mystical nature of this poem. So I shall finish the first one and then we'll come to the next. Kim avareva kuha kasya sharman nampakimasi gaganam gibhiram. So the sage tells you, we oma parayat no vyomna parastat uvaridesi diloka prabhuti satyalokantam yadasti tadabi nasi. What it means is, the worlds, different worlds below or the space above, none of this existed before the creation. Sustehi prak means before the creation, none of this existed. Again, it continues, Gahanam Gibhiram Ampakim Asid. So at that time, there was something that existed, which is deep, a deep darkness, a deep, indescribable feeling of awe and mystery. The next verse, Namrtirasid. There was no death, because there was no immortality. So death and deathlessness, these two, again, this language of opposites and paradox. The point is, the indescribable nature of this inquiry of this world is explained by using these apparently contradictory terms. So there was no death and there was no immortality. But at the same time, Naratriya Annak Asit Prakeda. There was no night and there was no day. So according to Vedanta, you know how this creation proceeds. When people die, when different living beings die, whatever they have done in this world, whatever actions they have done, all those actions will remain in seed form. Maybe, what you do in this life with our eyes and senses. The senses and eyes, all the five senses of perception, eyes, ears, and so on, they will perish along with this body. Hands all will perish. But the subtle tendencies and impressions left behind by your actions will remain in seed form. So when the next Vikalpa, the next Srishti, the next creation, the next cycle begins, all days will come back and different living beings will take birth again in appropriate bodies, human bodies or animal bodies. So all the samskaras that we recollect, that we gather in this life, they remain intact. Remember, it doesn't mean that samskaras cannot undergo transformation. Samskaras cannot be destroyed, but they can be modified. A person who has done a lot of good actions, along with that he has done also some bad actions. So good samskaras may be modified, may be polluted, may be affected by some bad samskaras, which are the result of bad actions. So what happens is, these samskaras will remain in seed form. Similarly, the whole existence also, the whole cosmos also will remain in seed form. This is something that modern scientists can say. Suppose one day this universe disappears. The universe, the world as we find today, as we experience today, it gets destroyed completely. Does it mean that there will be no life afterwards? It may be after several billions of years, another cycle can begin. And then the different living beings, different human beings who lived in this age, in this universe, they'll be born again. And according to the samskaras, impressions they have gathered, they will assume different bodies, different names and forms. So this happens as a will of this absolute reality. So remember, at the first verse, the sage is looking at the creation and he thinks, well, before creation, nothing that is absolute existed, nothing that is absolutely unreal. Also, what existed cannot be called absolute reality or absolute unreality. Nasadasid, absolute non-existence or absolute existence. You cannot use any of these terms when you try to define or describe what existed before creation. This is the beginning. The sage is contemplating on the origin of the universe. Finally, he will come to realize, well, there was something which also cannot be described, but it always exists. That's called technical Brahman. So this is slow evolution towards the idea of Advaitic concept of Brahman. So at the beginning, the sage is looking, contemplating, meditating on the mystery of the universe. So what was there before the creation began? There was something which cannot be called absolutely real or absolutely unreal. And slowly things began to emerge. And in the beginning, there was no time, neither death, nor deathlessness, nor night, nor day, nothing of that, nothing of the kind. But slowly, from the previous cycle, death and deathlessness, night and day, suns and moons, they re-emerged and a new cycle begins. This is how the cycles continue to move through the cyclic transmigratory cyclic rotation. This is a theme of this suktam. So at the very beginning, I don't want to go longer into this, you can ask questions. And this can be called somewhat an introduction into this. It's a bit puzzling. It has puzzled many scholars, not only us, but also in ancient times. It is chanted in a very, very musical, rhythmic fashion, but the philosophical implication is deep and mysterious. So what we can say is creation is not just somebody sitting above and creating something from some material and deciding a destiny and projecting somebody whom you should depend upon, whom you should pray to. Otherwise, you will suffer. Nothing of the kind. There is an inquiry independent of the God idea. That's an important thing. You don't find any God idea in this scheme. It's an independent inquiry. A sage is sitting, closing his eyes, thinking and meditating, and he thinks, well, in the beginning, what was there? Nasadasi. It could not be emptiness, because from emptiness, this world cannot come into existence. But it cannot be the absolute reality. From an absolute reality won't feel the need to create this world. So what was there? Something which is beyond description. So that's the idea. It's a bit mystical, fairly puzzling and confusing, but as we go deeper, you find there are grand allegories, illustrations, concepts and ideas independent of what we now call theism or theology or the God idea. So very important. Thank you. We can have interaction. Most welcome. This can only be called an introduction. This. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Ram, please go ahead.
Yeah.
We know the definition of Brahman, the three attributes of Brahman and Atma as Sat Chit Ananda. By Sat we mean Trikala Tishtati, present in the three states of time. But you said that the time itself loses significance when you transcend, when you get enlightened. There's no sense of time. This is only an attribute that is attributes that bind or describe the Brahman while we are unenlightened, and that is not contradicted here. Right?
No, I tell you. So remember, when you read, and I think you must have read a lot of the primary introductory works of Shankaracharya, Tattwamayananda, which you refer to. In these books that you must have read, there are very clear-cut descriptions of philosophical terms, philosophical ideas. Here is a grand poem. A poet is contemplating the mystery of the universe. And you don't ask a poet, why do you call this, why do you call that? And when you reach to the end, you find the poet actually reaches where Shankaracharya begins, remember. Whatever you read in the introductory verse, because I'm very happy to remember your early questions, which showed that you have read a lot of the primers or introductory works of Shankaracharya's Prakarana Granthas, Tattva, Atmabodha, Viveka Chudamani, and so on. These are wonderful. These poems are different from that. They have a different quality. These are the early documents of man's search, not search, intellectual search, emotional search, poetical inquiry. The poet doesn't inquire into the mystery of the universe using a manual or a GPS system. Okay. Poet dwells deep into the mystery of the universe through his own root, the root of his emotions and feelings. So he's somewhere asks this question, what is the universe? So we have only begun this. What is the universe? And you see, what was there before all these trees and mountains and valleys came into existence? He's asking the question. Certainly it was not total emptiness. Asadasit. Because from total emptiness, all this cannot come into existence. No sadasit. nor the absolute reality. So what was the? Then he goes on, he goes on contemplating. Tadani. Tadani means what? Before all this came into existence. This is not the way Vedanta philosophy begins, but is the way a mystic opened his eyes, not his physical eyes, but his spiritual, mystical eyes, the mystical universe. Then he says, well, certainly, and of course, Sayanacharya's commentary I read, Sayanacharya is a great Advaitin, so he used the word Sesavishana and so on, which actually a jargon, an allegory, a comparison, a method of comparison used straight from the pages of Shankaracharya's commentaries. So let us stick to the poem itself, he says. So he says, Kimavari Vakuha Kasya Sarman. Again, before this, neither the space nor the worlds below, nor suns or moons, none of this existed. There is no denial, there is no proclamation of Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, nothing of the kind. Here, poet is just looking at the skies and mountains and country. So that's the context where we are. So that's the glory of this poem. So if you ask the question, Satchidananda is the Surupa Lakshana of Brahman, because you cannot describe it, but what you can say is absolute existence, absolute knowledge, absolute bliss. That the nearest approximation you can adopt while describing the indescribable. The indescribability of Brahman is different from the indescribability of the mystery of the universe that is implied here. Here, the poet is not looking at Advaita philosophy right now in these first one or two verses, looking at the creation, the mystery, from where all this come, how they came into existence, what was there before they all came into existence. So we have reached only that point. Okay, remember. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
David, please go ahead, David.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions, but the first question is, what's the name of the scripture and the author? Can somebody print that in the chat so I can look at its spelling? Is that possible? And then I wanted to know what how does this compare time-wise to Nagarjuna or Gaudapada, the Mandukya Karika? Is this prior to all of that?
Oh, yeah. This is Rigveda Samhita. It's Gaudapada lived the 6th century AD. This goes back to 3rd or 4th millennium BC.
Okay.
Veda Samhita, Rigveda Samhita is the earliest document. Gaudapada is relatively a modern author who lived in the 6th century AD. And Rigveda Samhita is the most original, is the first human document, illustrating our spiritual aspirations of humanity. It's the first document. It's of course, there are different views according to modern. Those who try to make it more modern, they say it belongs to 3rd millennium BC. But the modern researchers have confirmed they were much older than this. And this is older than even other Vedas, which are old enough. So it's much older than Mahabharata, Gita, or anything. It's much more old. So this is important. That's why you find language is primitive. Language is not so well organized. So that's the strength of the poetic force of the language. Where the language becomes very well organized, is poetic beauty will be lost. This is an important thing. A great poetry is born when a poet directly, intimately communicates in his own raw, unrefined language with the experiences that he's trying to express. So that's why Rigvedic language is very raw, very unrefined. It long before Sanskrit language was standardized in the 9th century BC by Panini. This doesn't follow the language, the grammatical rules of Panini completely. I mean, Panini standardized the Sanskrit language. This also he must have considered, but this is a much older. It's almost like what to say, if you compare Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion or Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy, compare that book with Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Do you imagine? Canterbury, very primitive compared to Bernard Shaw. I'm giving an example.
So this is written in Sanskrit, but a kind of a very different Sanskrit, kind of like the difference between English of today and Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, it's written in a Sanskrit long before Sanskrit grammar was standardized. There was, of course, the school of grammar, which is called, Vaidika Vyakaranam is called Vedic grammar, which was more irregular in the sense. To give an example, those of you who study linguistics and philology will understand. Sarvesham Sabdanam Dhadujatvam Dhadunam Anegarthatvam cha. It's an important proclamation regarding Vedic grammar, which is different from modern grammar. Means every word comes from a root, and every root can have any number of meanings or implications, depending upon the context and the person who uses that. Now, you see, Prakarana Vaividhyat, Pravaktuhu Vaividhyacha, Shabdanam Anegarthatvam. These are all statements from Durgacharya's commentary on Yaska's Nirukta. Yaska was the one who selected a few of these Vedic mantras and wrote a book that could be roughly called a thesaurus. Means he took some words and gave descriptions, different alternate meanings and implications. So what it means is, it's a very irregular language, very irregular. So, but remember, many of these words they are according to Panini's grammar, because Panini considered, say, for example, Kasya Sharman. It's Sanskrit. Kasya means a Sashti Vibhakti, sixth case ending singular. So all these are modern grammatical rules. But the point is, the book as such, Rigveda Samhita as such, it predates the standardization of Sanskrit grammar and linguistics and philology. That's the idea behind it. Thank you. Question. Yeah.
Swamiji, can we say that one takeaway from the Nasadiya Suktam for ordinary people is to say, don't worry about what creation is all about. There was existence and there was non-existence. I mean, if that is the level of abstraction at which the rishis are thinking, they're probably trying to say that, this is something that you don't need to worry about, how creation came about.
Yeah, that also can be one reading of it. But but there are also some strong statements which have got a deep philosophical implication. For example, the fourth mantra, Sadhu Bandhu Asadi Vipatisha Kavayo Manisha. So what it means is, Ainacharya says, for example, Satvena Idani Manubhuyamanasi Jagada Bandham Hedabhudam Kalpandare Prana Karma Samuham, etc. But he says, beings doing different karma, different actions, going through different experiences, they leave behind the seeds of their own samskaras, and based on that, the next cycle begins. So you can see a direct. Hello, some sound is coming. Okay. You can see direct reference to the whole mechanism of rebirth, love karma, and reincarnation, all that you find here. You're right. That kind of interpretation is there, but there are also very, very, very direct allusions or direct implications, references to some of our own experience which are very relevant. For example, law of karma is there. Talking away incarnation, all can be read into. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maharaj,
Yeah.
you used a Sanskrit term in passing, Trigalapada, for beyond changes. I was wondering about that term.
Yeah, but it is a trikala abadita. Abadita means unaffected, not modified. Trikala means 3 times, 3 points of time: the past, the present, and future.
Ah.
So the absolute reality remains the same without being affected by the change in time. So, you know, the past, what belongs to the past can change, can become older and older, and the things are not perceived the same way in the past, present, and future. So these triple points of time will affect everything in this world. The entire phenomenal empirical experiences and objects are subjected to changes in the past, present, and future. They are bound to change in time, according to time. So the absolute reality is beyond all this. That is the word is Sat, because it is beyond changes. So Brahman or Atman, it is not something that is created by somebody, because it always existed. So it doesn't undergo any change in time. It remains the same without any change. That is the meaning of Trikala Abadita, means not being affected or modified by the 3 points of time: past, present, and future. That's the idea.
Thank you, Maharaj. So what a wonderful, poetical, compressed word for an important concept.
Yeah.
David's hand is up again. Go ahead, David.
Swami, is the term Prakriti used in this poem? Is that the same meaning? Is that, I mean, both in terms of that and also like in the Panchadasi, like the Panchadasi uses the unmanifest, but it also uses Hiranyagarbha, or are those all later concepts that this doesn't refer to?
Yeah, here in fact, Panchadasi. Panchadasi is a book that belongs to 13th, 14th century by Vidyaranya. It's a very modern book. It is more modern than Gaudapada's book. It's a very modern book. It is a book on Advaita Vedanta. I mean, different aspects of the Vedanta. So this is much more modern. This is much more modern. Sorry, this is much more ancient. Panchadasi is very modern. Rigveda Samhita is very, very ancient. Very ancient. The seeds of many of these ideas that you find in Shankaracharya's books, and also in the writings of Vidyaranya, who lived in 13th, 14th century, the author of Panchadasi, all can be found in the verses of Rigveda Samhita. Veda is the mother of everything. All came from there. Panchadasi is written in chaste modern Sanskrit. Rigveda Samhita, belonging to 3rd or 4th millennium BC, is written in a very irregular, archaic language. Very archaic. Yeah.
So this is the author of this. Who is the author of this Samhita?
Yeah. Well, we can say these verses were revealed to a great sage. His name is Parameshti Prajapati. He's the compiler. So what we can say, he must have, in a contemplative mood, these thoughts must have flashed through his mind, and he must have written down. Because many of these sages were living independently in different hermitages. Later, all of them got codified and became Rigveda Samhita. So the thoughts that occurred to him in his contemplation, he must have written down. He must have taught to his disciples. And in a particular meter, that is ancient Vedic meter, the Trishtu, and he addressed this to a deity. So at the beginning, these must have in ancient times, these Vedic sages sitting in the banks of rivers or mountains, the Himalayas, in meditation. They must have thought of the mystery of the universe. You remember, there was no temple, there was no puja, there were no rituals. They were all living close to nature. So just sat there, thought and contemplated. These thoughts must have flashed through their mind, and in the work, this great mystical poem, and he must have taught his disciples and others, and they wrote. That's how it came to our hands today. So idea behind.
Were they?
Yeah.
So they were illumined souls. These people, most likely.
Certainly, they were illumined souls. Remember, such forceful ideas cannot originate in a mind which is not illumined. The thoughts going beyond, the transcendental thought going beyond this body, its requirements, and dwelling deep into the mystery of the universe, the evolution of the universe. What's the truth behind all this? This cannot happen unless they're enlightened. The main difference between many modern Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, you can find. I mean, some of the 19th century Victorian poets. Just give an example, or Emerson and others. Take example, Vedanta. The main difference, I think, tell you, these sages, because of those times, they must have practiced a lot of austerity by force of circumstances, living the Himalayas. Have you heard of Swami Tattwamayananda? He was the guru of Swami Chinmayananda. And he was living in Gomukhan, high in the mountains, where even nomads won't live, even animals won't live during winter. He remained eating some leaves and things like that. So this Swami went there, and then he was transformed. Perhaps he was a modern journalist. Anyway, the changes that happened, and he became a great monk. And give an example. So this is in the early decades of 20th century, as you can find. So you can imagine, he didn't have a large number of books or any material, living in a hut somewhere. So this is in the early decades of 20th century. Even today, you find Ramana Maharshi, for example. In Tirunamali, Ramana Maharshi, how we live this magic. So what I mean to say, these great sages, they dwell deep into their own being. As a result, certain ideas will flash to their mind. But these experiences are supported by great spiritual disciplines like meditation, austerity, rigorous, sometimes to the point of self-torture, you find. When these ideas flashing through their mind are supported by these severe disciplines, they acquire a special potency, and they remain there, and they'll inspire many generations to come. In today's world, in 21st century, for example, a man like Thoreau or Emerson, who could think of things that nobody thought of in those days. I mean, higher concepts of life and existence. Because there was not a tradition to support and continue that. So today you don't have Emersons living in our country today. But these sages, they left behind them a tradition, a group of disciples who follow their disciplines. So we call it parampara, a lineage. The lineage, perhaps, you can find in Christian mystical tradition, in the Jewish mystical tradition, had a lineage studying Torah and Talmud with great devotion, with dedication. So a tradition, a spiritual potency is gradually evolves. Buddhism, not only Hinduism, any of these traditions you find. So when this experience, we call enlightenment dimension, that when this enlightenment is supported by severe self-discipline, spiritual disciplines, meditation, then it becomes a tradition. And the tradition, in a way, influences and inspires succeeding generations of people. And you find that light remains alive for centuries when there is lineage. In the absence of a lineage, the light may not remain for long. First World War came and transcendentalism practically disappeared. You just imagine. If there was no First World War, that transcendentalism would have remained more potent and influential in American history. But the First World War came, depression came, so you can imagine. A young society will radically undergo changes very fast. But ancient Indian society, even now there are people who won't care for your science and technology. They still continue taking bath, cold water in the morning, reciting the Vedas, and then only they'll take breakfast. Things like that. It may look ridiculous and superstitious, but that preserves a lineage that keeps alive this light of tradition. That's it.
So the people who became illumined and wrote these poems, or before them, maybe they had no scripture. They just somehow got illumined without any study or.
You're right. Rigvedic sages may not have had any canonical tradition to bank upon, to depend upon, because Rigveda is the beginning of Hindu spiritual canon literature in English. 3rd or 4th millennium BC. So that's the idea.
So, because even,
let's say Rigveda with the Book of the Dead, Egypt's the ancient, say, old book of Egyptian culture. Well, Rigveda Samhita is recited, studied by people, including small little children. Even now, recently I attended a Vedic seminar, 2 Vedic seminars, in fact 3 or 4 actually. One involved a project for preserving ancient manuscripts. They're preserving ancient manuscripts in an ancient monastery with the help of some manuscriptologists from Pondicherry, who are French people. They have come there, they're giving technical assistance for preservation of this. And they look upon this, and all these professors with PhDs in Sanskrit and Vedic studies, they dedicated to this. Small little children reciting, taking bath in the morning and reciting this. You don't find anyone doing that, the Book of the Dead of the Egyptian civilization. Because there is a sanctity and sacredness attached to that. That is very self-rewarding. When you do something and you're going terrible austerities, but we'll do that, when you do that with a great sense of sanctity and sacredness, then that austerity is a very pleasant experience for those who do that. That is true also in the Jewish tradition, or at least in the Middle Ages in medieval Europe, when the Dominican and Franciscan monasteries preserved in the intellectual culture of Catholic tradition. So they happened. So that's the idea. Okay.
There are no further questions, Maharaj.
No further question. Thank you, everyone. This is just beginning of this. It's a very small, very small, very short poem, about 7 verses, but very profound and not easily intelligible when you just read the English translation. So I'm trying to make an attempt to explain. Okay. Thank you. Namaskar, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Namaskar, Swami.
Shanti Shanti Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.